You guys ready? Let's hustle.
Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwayne McFarland.
All across the fantasy universe, welcome one and all. It is the I can't even talk, Dwayne. You know it's a crazy night. The Fantasy Football Hustle, powered by Pro Football Focus. There's a huge storm going on, folks. I'm Brian Drake here with Dwayne McFarland, and it's got me all flustered. We're about to sit down and start, and I had to tell Dwayne, I think my mini fridge is about to explode behind the bar behind me. I go look, and there is just this rumbling outside. I just hear whoosh, 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 whoosh. And if you're watching on YouTube, there is a small window behind my shoulder, you can see, and I had it cracked open, and I just see lawn chairs flying around the backyard, like kids running for cover. I'm like, oh my gosh. So it's got me all kind of flustered. I was hoping the power wouldn't go out, but we're good. We're here. It's Drake. It's Dwayne. It's the hustle. What a big week, man. Tons of great feedback from last week's show, breaking down a bunch of teams. We're going to do 5 more tonight: Jags, Chiefs, Raiders, Chargers, and Rams. You were crushing it, Dwayne, on Sirius XM with our buddies Bob Harris and Mike Dempsey on the Football Diehards. And I noticed on Twitter you're lighting it up this weekend, engaging all over the place, responding to people who ask you questions, because that's a thing on Twitter, I guess. People get upset if you ask them questions. But how are you, my pal? What's up?
I'm good, man. Yeah, it was a good weekend. Love being on with the diehards. Those guys are absolutely great. The coolest parts are like just in between being on the air, just sitting there chatting with those guys. They're really 2 down-to-earth dudes. They're fun to chat with. We definitely talked, Dempsey and I were talking about the Jags receivers, and I was getting his thoughts on it. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun. Did 2 segments there, so that was fun. And then, the secret to fantasy Twitter right now is Cam Akers. If you've got a good tweet about Cam Akers, like, it will go nuts. And that's essentially what happened. It was funny. Like, I put out the first tweet, just says, y'all want a Cam Akers utilization thread. Before I could even get done typing the thread, knowing, obviously it was kind of a rhetorical question. I was making one. I think it had already 80 likes. And responses, people were like, yes, because it's been kind of a hot topic lately. Right, is Cam Akers really worth taking, at the turn? And, there's a lot of debate around that. So, yeah, man, it's good weekend. Can't wait to jump into some more stuff that we only really share on the show. We don't put it all out there on Twitter, Drake.
No, we don't. One of the things I put out on Twitter was for our good pal, Cody Main. He's a big Busch Light fan, so I grabbed a Busch Light apple. I'll crack that in honor of him and his great new show, Establish the Collection, over there at establishtheRun.com. If you want to read Dwayne, it's at pff.com. It's at establishtheRun.com. And you're going to pff.com because you're using our promo code HUSTLE. It's going to save you 25% off any sub package. Right now, we've got that college football preview. The hell with that. We got the fantasy football preview. Have you seen that on the site, guys? I'm tweeting it from our show account at FF Hustle. All the guys over there, Andrew Erickson, Ian Harditz, everybody who's on staff at PFF pumping out great content. Use our promo code HUSTLE. Save a ton of dough. It really is some of the best stuff you're going to find in the industry. Dwayne, have you had a chance to look at the PFF fantasy guide yet?
Oh, dude, I'm always looking at all the stuff over at PFF. There's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of good content, period, right, in this industry. And obviously PFF is putting out a lot of that. So yeah, man, I'm definitely checking out what those guys are laying down. Of course, I'm always digging into the data, into the tools, all the things that you get, with the premium sub. That's how I power a lot of my research from a data perspective. So yeah, PFF is always up. When my browser opens, PFF, 3 different PFF tabs, automatically open up every day.
That's pretty good. I just had my first sip there. They're not a sponsor of the show yet. It's pretty good. So, all right, let's get rocking and rolling here. I apologize if I'm a little rough. These allergies have just kicked my ass. I've never been a guy to take anything for allergies because I never thought I had them. My wife's like, you got to take a Zyrtec. You got to take Benadryl, Sudafed, something. So I popped like 38 different things today. We'll see how that mixes with the Busch Light. So as you all know, I love to derail hype trains. We're going to start in Jacksonville with Laviska Shenault because every fantasy guy in the industry, and gal for that matter, loves Visca. I think they just like saying Visca, Dwayne, and they love having this guy with a cool haircut. He looks like the Predator out there running around catching 5-yard passes, and basically putting up 5 yards a game. So last year, he caught 58 balls for 600 yards and 5 touchdowns, ran another 18 times for 91 measly yards. I'll admit, he had really bad QB play. Nobody can deny that, okay? Trevor Lawrence, obvious upgrade. And the kid has talent. Went to Colorado. I kind of wanted my Eagles to draft him. He was a second-round pick. Yay on him. Good, great, whatever. So we got a new offense coming to town. So none of what he did in the past matters. So we can look back and say he did this, he did that. None of it matters because we've got new scheme coming in. We've got Urban Meyer, the OC, and we've got Darrell Bevel, the offensive coordinator. But if we want to look back for a second, he had 7 games with 5 or more catches. Awesome. Here's what's not awesome, Dwayne. In 7 of those games, he turned those 5 catches into 60 or more yards only 3 times. And once after week 5, which was a garbage week 17 game against the Colts where he scored twice, playing 69% of the snaps. He went 6 for 68 that day. Here's my argument, Dwayne. It's not that he's not a nice player, because I think he is. My argument is that you're paying this ultra premium for Shenault. He's at his ceiling, folks. He finished at wide receiver 64 last year in PPR, 11.2 points per game. Current ADP on Underdog, wide receiver 39. That's 79th overall. That's a 7th round pick. Here are the guys you could be getting after Laviska Shenault at this ADP. Mike Williams, Hollywood Brown, Curtis Samuel, Will Fuller, Jarvis Landry, AB, Brandon Cooks, Devontae Parker, Michael Pittman, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith. Are you kidding me? You're lying to me. You're lying to Dwayne. More importantly, you're lying to yourself. If you think you're going to take Laviska Shenault over any of those guys and not be kicking yourself halfway through the season. Oh, by the way, they added Travis Etienne, who's going to be catching balls around the line of scrimmage. Exactly what everyone out there thinks Laviska Shenault's going to do. Then they paid this guy named Marvin Jones $9 million guaranteed for this year. And let's not forget DJ Chark, who caught 1,000 yards just 2 short years ago. I'm done, Dwayne. I'm out. Enough with the Laviska Shenault hype train. You want him on your bench as your 4th wide receiver? Great. Stop with the nonsense. He's this number 1. He's not.
Yeah, I think people get into it, Drake, because it's a 2nd-year receiver, right? That's young, and so there's always this potential upside. So this is what I would say that's a positive for Laviska Shenault. I expect them to run 11 personnel a ton, just like they did last year. Last year they ran 11 personnel on 72%. The plays. If you look at Urban Meyer's track record at Ohio State, he's always been one to really craft his personnel groupings based on the talent that he has. So he's had multiple years where he's ran 11 a ton of the plays, and I expect him to do that. Again here, Darrell Bevel. We've also seen him at times use 11. He's more of kind of likes to mix things in, and he'll use some 12. And if they're trailing, he'll go to 11. That's really what he did with the Lions. Obviously, early on with the Seahawks as well, that was really his MO. So I think we'll see some mix. But when I look at their tight ends, they don't have any tight ends. So receivers really are the weapons they have, and if they can somehow find a way to harness Etienne and James Robinson out of the backfield, those are probably those are just your best weapons, right? So that's who you're going to probably try to use on offense. So I don't question that. I guess the argument you could make is if Jacksonville turns out to be like a cheap version of the Rams offense, right? Or maybe even a subversion of the Bengals offense, which is what everybody's calling, the Bengals. They're really the cheap version of the Rams offense in drafts. Well, maybe this is like one step down from that. I do agree that it's just, it's probably a little bit of a high of a price. I'm not going to just hate on anybody that makes that pick. Look, if you really like Shenault, you're getting him in the 7th, 8th round. It's not that early. So if you really love the guy, go ahead. I'm with you, Drake. I don't see it as being something where he's going to take over. Like if I see a receiver on this team that I want to draft that I think can really do everything, it's still DJ Chark. People really want to quickly dismiss him. He battled through injuries last year, but his second year, he came out really raw as a rookie from LSU. But then in his second year, he really popped, and he did some things with Gardner Minshew down the stretch last year. He was putting up a lot of air yards, didn't have a lot of great targets. I expect his targets to improve. So Chark's really the guy that I'm the most excited about. He goes a little bit more, a little bit ahead of Shenault, but I just think his touchdown, opportunity is greater because I think he's more likely to score from anywhere on the field. I think Shenault's going to mostly work underneath. And we do have the question of Etienne, how much, is Etienne going to gobble up, to your point, some of those targets really in the same area. I could very easily see, though, and I'll just go ahead and jump in for folks on my projections for the Jaguars since we're starting off here.
Let's do it.
I have all the receivers fairly close, right? I've got DJ Chark with 22% of the targets. I've got Marvin Jones with 18%, and I've got Laviska Shenault with 16%. And here's why. As far as I can tell so far, everything I've read, I could switch Shenault and Marvin Jones, but I think that Marvin Jones is going to be on the field in the two wide receiver sets when they go to it. Darrell Bevell's his old coach, right? They want to be able to use the play action, stretch the field vertically. They've talked a lot about that. That's the element that Bevell's going to try to bring. Urban Meyer has used that in the past, but he's also much more of he'll use the underneath type stuff, which is where I think Shenault can come in. So, I could see myself eventually switching, Jones and Shenault, and so then you would have Shenault at 18%. You would have Marvin Jones at 16%, but I've got them all pretty close. It's basically what I just said. It's it's going to be a spread out offense. And then I've got Etienne with 13% of the targets. So you've got a 22, an 18, a 16%, a 13%. And then you have a bunch of other dudes, just getting, 5, 6, 7%. These tight ends aren't anything that really worry you. I'd be surprised if the tight ends combined for more than 12% of the target. So, for me, that puts Laviska Shenault at 152 PPR points. Now, this is, I think, of range of outcomes. This is really his median range of outcomes. I think he does have some upside, but to your point, he hasn't shown us the big playability. Last year, if he had shown, and he did show some of this at Colorado, just to be clear, right?
Sure.
And even when we had Matt Waldman on, he talked a lot about him as a playmaker after the catch, even around the line of scrimmage. To your point, there were some targeting problems. So I wouldn't rule it out. The Shenault is more of a playmaker, and we do see it more this year. Again, I just think there's too many mouths to feed in an offense that it could be anywhere from bad to average, right? I don't see
the fifth option.
Yeah,
if you want to be.
I think he's the third option still in the passing game, right? I think Etienne's the fourth option in the passing game. And then I think James Robinson and the other guys are all mixed in together in that 6 to 7% range. My problem is more what you said. It's just the opportunity cost of some of the other guys going around Shenault that I think really are guys that attack the field from every angle and have a better opportunity, really, I think, to maybe catapult some other people on their depth chart and really take over a lead role. Again, not to say that Shenault can't do it, and not to say that I think Chenault's price tag is just exorbitantly high. I think it's right in the range where I would expect him to go, given that he's a second-year receiver with an opportunity to improve. He should have a better quarterback, and they've got a whole new scheme, right? But I do believe he will be off the field when they're not in 11 personnel. And that was his. So last year, even though the Jags ran that personnel grouping, 72% of the time, right, which was really high. If you look at Shenault, and you look at his routes run percentages, there's a lot of times where he's down in the 60s, right? A 67%, 67%, 47%, 65%, 45%, 62%. There's a 95% in there one time. He's got one in an 87. He only has 2 games where he got to over 80% of the routes. And that's in an offense that, again, ran 3 wide receivers on 2/3, of their plays. So, 3/4 of their plays, right at 71%. So that in itself makes it just kind of concerns me. It's hard, if you're not going to be on the field, quite enough. Again, if he suddenly wins the other role and Marvin Jones becomes the third receiver and then Shenault kicks inside when Jones is on the field too, then I think Shenault more warrants, the pick, of where he's going.
Yeah, and a lot of great talk going on here in our chat room. We love having everybody hop over on the Fantasy Football Hustle YouTube channel page, and you can always watch right along with us. We appreciate you guys being in there. And so much good conversation going on about the Jags here, and people just kind of talk with each other. And I saw one guy in the chat mention, he goes, well, the guys you mentioned ADP won't be the number one on their own team. And I take issue with that. Hollywood Brown, number one on his own team. Jarvis Landry, we'll see. Who knows? Brandon Cooks, absolutely number one on his own team. Devontae Parker could be. Michael Pittman likely will be. Devonta Smith will be. So I just named your 5 guys right there who will be the number one wide receiver on their team. But anyways, I digress. Let's talk about you want to talk about the Jags running backs here, because James Robinson out of nowhere, Dwayne, finished as the PPR running back 7 last year. His 17.9 points per game was better than Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, Nick Chubb, and Antonio Gibson, name a few. But the Jags sucked the life out of Robinson when they drafted Clemson stud Travis Etienne at the end of round 1. So there's no way Robinson is going to catch 49 passes again, and he likely won't rush for 1,000 yards if he's splitting with another back. He was legit good last year, though, Dwayne. The Jags finished 3rd in the NFL in rushing yards after contact, and he had 7 of the team's 9 rushing scores, which, by the way, was dead last in the NFL. But he was really good. I was surprised that they went out and got ETN, because I feel like that's such a luxury pick on a bad team. Like, you didn't need him to make this team better.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's just kind of probably more of an old school way of looking at it from Urban Meyer's perspective, right? He likes to have multiple runners. He likes to be, he's going to be very willing to run when he can. I mean, I think that's the other thing with this team, right? We can see less passing volume. That's another thing that could hurt Shenault, right? Because I think there will be games where they're going to try to stick to the run game, even longer, right, than what they did last year. So I think that's just something that you gotta think about. I like both players okay. It's just like where their ADPs are. I pretty much find myself not taking either one of them when I'm drafting Drake.
Same.
But I have it split down where it's pretty close, right? Like, and if you listen to like Jay Moyer, you listen to Matt Waldman, even other there's a lot of film folks that will say James Robinson's clearly the better running back, right, than Travis Etienne. But the issue I have is they've invested a 1st-round pick in Etienne, so he's going to get on the field.
Yeah,
and who knows? James Robinson could hold off Etienne, but he could also have less snaps than Etienne. And a lot of it, unfortunately, goes back to the fact that there's nothing invested in James Robinson. These coaches do weird things, and who knows? They may be getting told that by a GM. I don't know all the conversations that go on. But to your point, I thought James Robinson looked really good. I've got Etienne at 167 carries, James Robinson at 145. That's 670 yards rushing for Etienne and 4 touchdowns. James Robinson, 580 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns. But to your point, I've got more of the targets going to Etienne just based on the fact that we've heard through minicamp and OTAs that he's been lining up all over the place. Now, part of that was because a lot of the receivers weren't healthy. But if you looked at Urban Meyer's comments, what he said, worst case, we have a running back that's really good, has a good baseline of receiving skills. Best case, we've got an elite back that can literally do everything. They can be the do-it-all kind of back, like what we would have thought of. And not to say I'm saying he's going to be Marshall Faulk, but that true can do everything on the field, Kamara, that type of player. And again, not saying that's where Etienne is at, but that seems, when I read the quotes and read between the lines of what I'm hearing from Urban Meyer and Darren Bevel, that's kind of what I'm hearing in my ears. So I've got him at 72 targets versus only 44 for James Robinson. I've got 57 receptions versus 35, 460 receiving yards versus 247, and 2 receiving touchdowns versus 1 receiving touchdown. So for Etienne, I mean, that's 700 yards or 670 yards rushing, 460 yards, receiving. So, I mean, you're putting him, right at the 1,100 total yard mark, and I got him at 6 touchdowns. If he got some lucky on some touchdown variants, he could score. If he scores a couple long ones, he could score 8 or 9. I could also see a scenario where you're like, Etienne scored 4 touchdowns on the whole season, like all together, because I think it could really be tricky as they get down inside the 5. Do they give all that work to Robinson? We don't know. They have not given us any clear indication of saying either one of these guys has a certain role. Like, I've read everything I can find on it, and there's kind of some things there, but nothing definitive enough yet. So this is one, Drake, we will definitely revisit, right, through training camp. I think we'll have to come back to this. So for now, this is the best I can give everybody. I think it's a pretty close split with Etienne getting more of the work in the passing game and just slightly getting a little bit more work than Robinson altogether.
Now, you guys are hearing this information from Dwayne. You're loving it. You're running to your draft boards. You're going to be putting those stickers up because we're back to normal, hopefully, and enjoying each other's company in person for live drafts. And there's nothing better than a live draft. Trust me, I'm a commissioner of a league. The best part of my year is sitting down with those 11 other guys and having our draft. And what you're going to want to do is head over to visit our friends at draftwithredzone.com and pick up their draft pack bundle. Use our promo code FFHustle. I know a bunch of you guys have already done this because I get an email every time somebody buys one of these bad boys. People are going over, they're picking these up. You get your stickers, you get the big ass board, you get a custom championship ring. Go over to @FFHustle on Twitter. I retweeted it. It comes in a kick-ass box that gets engraved with your either league name or the winner's name on it. It's super cool. Stickers, last place punishment sign. It's a beautiful package. Go to our Instagram also @FFHustle. You can see me unboxing the one that they sent to me. Very cool product. Thank you, draftwithredzone.com, for sponsoring the show. Use promo code FFHustle. So we don't have to tell you guys to draft Mahomes, to draft Kelsey, to draft Tyreek Hill. That's pretty much given. What I do want to talk about with the Kansas City Chiefs here, Dwayne, is CEH, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who last year at this time, the hype was so ridiculous that the rookie was going mid-first round. Now you can get him at the 2-3 turn. The Chiefs upgraded their offensive line, kind of retooled it. They're also getting a guy back from COVID who opted out. This is a team who ran the fewest plays in the NFL versus 8 defenders in the box, meaning most of the time CEH is running versus sub packages. Also missed 3 regular season games, so that can kind of deflate his numbers. Push comes to shove. He ran for 800 yards and 4 touchdowns, caught 36 of his 54 targets for 297 in his score. In the playoffs, you recall, he missed their first playoff game. He's still banged up. Came back in the AFC title game and the Super Bowl for only a combined 15 carries. Lev Bell's gone. Damian Williams is out of the picture. So it's just the mentor, Darrell Williams, and new addition, Jerick McKinnon, to the Kansas City backfield. What do you think here, Dwayne? Is there a buying opportunity on Mr. Edwards-Helaire?
Yeah, I think first just piecing apart like a couple of things you just said that I think are really important. A lot of people probably don't remember, and these are the sort of things that get lost. But if you look at last year, right tackle Mitch Schwartz only played 6 games. Duvernay Tardif, not that he'd been a great guard, but you know, when you have a cohesive unit, it does matter. He opted out for COVID-19, so he didn't play any of the games. Their 3rd round pick, Lucas Nyang, he did not play. He opted out as well. Osemele, who they had signed as a free agent to play guard last year, he only played 5 games. So they really struggled on the offensive line. And so that does impact your efficiency. It's hard to say exactly how much, but when you have that many people hurt on what was typically a good, you guys all know, you watch the Super Bowl. I mean, Mahomes was running for his life. There was not a lot of running lanes. It was problematic. So they traded for left tackle Orlando Brown Jr. from the Ravens. Obviously, you know, they sent plenty to get him. Then they signed left guard Joe Thuney. They got center Austin Blythe, and they also drafted Creed Humphrey in the 2nd round. So they'll have a competition at center. And one of those 2 guys could also play guard if Duvernay Tardif doesn't do as well. They also took a flyer on Kyle Long. So like they've got not only did they add players to their offensive line, they added competition and depth to their offensive line. Mm-hmm. So across all those players we just named, I expect their offensive line to be much better. Do we think it'll be where it was 3 years ago when Mitch Schwartz was like at his top of his game? You had Eric Fisher at the top of his game. Probably not, but from a run blocking standpoint, like those interior linemen, they run a lot of inside zone, but they are talking about running more power concepts and doing different things like that. If you look at these linemen that they're signing now, they are not of the same mold of what Andy Reid had used in the past. So it does make you wonder if they're just going to get much more aggressive, right, with their run blocking. And, you know, obviously they've got to hold up and pass protection for Patrick Mahomes, but these are different types of offensive linemen than what we've seen in the past. So I think that could be a positive thing for Edwards-Helaire. It is a team that's going to throw the ball all the time. It doesn't matter if they're leading, if they're losing, if they're tied. This team over the last 3 years with Mahomes at the helm, 64-34, that's pass to run, 66-34, 64-36, and 64-36. So there's not a ton of rushing attempts to go around, but what there is a lot of potential in the passing game. And that's really where we need Clyde Edwards-Helaire, to step up. If you look at minicamp, they talked about it's just making sure. So this is a direct quote, right, from Eric Bieniemy. Said it's just making sure he's better at understanding what exactly we're doing. And what he's talking about is his pass blocking, all that sort of stuff. When you come in as a rookie, obviously everything is brand new. Everything and every week is a new playbook for you in a sense. So he's had an opportunity to get his feet under him. And you got to remember, last year he missed game 12 due to an illness. He missed weeks 15 and 16 due to an ankle, missed the first playoff game after a bye week, right, from the same ankle thing. So it was a high ankle sprain that he was having to deal with. And then he came back. He averaged early on, this is what people forget, Drake. Early on, he averaged 66% of the snaps, 56%. This is the first 6 games, 56% of the routes, 13% of the targets in this offense. That's very nice. And the other thing that I loved about it, 64% of his targets were coming on the first read. That's a 27% bump over the average NFL running back as far as being the first read on a target. That means when he's getting out into the route, they're actually designing things for him, and they're trying to get him involved in the offense. He's not just a check down. And his average depth of target also shows that. Again, still in the first 6 games, handled 71% of the attempts, 26% of the 2-minute, which that was bad. That's where Darrell Williams was immediately an impact. But he handled 83% of the 4-minute offense, so that's closing a game out, but only 18% of the long down and distance. So the passing role was never really his, but everything else was his. So think of him as right now, if you just had to say what's the best comparison for him if he doesn't get the passing game or anything back. He's on a really good offense, won't be on as good of an offensive line, probably isn't quite as explosive, but he's going to be on a better offense than Jonathan Taylor. I know he used Jonathan Taylor a lot, but essentially they're the same player, right? They're both going to have the same kind of role. But here's what I would say. Edwards-Helaire has a much better chance of taking over the complete role than Jonathan Taylor does. And you get him, like you said, you can get him at the end of the second round. Sometimes he's creeping into the middle second. I think the sharps are starting to get on to Edwards-Helaire. He's starting to move up, and people are starting to be willing to take a little bit more of a risk with him. And so you're just going to have to kind of keep an eye on that. And so we'll see what happens. There was never any moment, even later, like postseason or anything like that, where he truly took over that passing down work. He was never able to take that. So we're going to have to really keep an eye on that. And that's where Jerick McKinnon could also come in, because we know Darrell Williams can do it. He can pass block. He took that role last year. But there's also now Jerick McKinnon, who happens to be a pretty decent receiver out of the backfield. So he's got some hurdles to overcome, but they did spend a first-round pick on him last year. The 2 other guys that are on the roster, it's not like they're Melvin Gordon. I know we talked about Javonte Williams last week. He's dealing with Melvin Gordon. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not dealing with Melvin Gordon. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not dealing with having a Naheem Hines, like a very elite specialist pass receiving back. So I think the path for Edwards-Helaire, if you take him at the end of the second or the third, number one, you're thinking, I'll probably be okay if he just takes 65, 70% of the attempts on what's probably going to be the leading offense in the entire NFL. And even in those early games, he was seeing 12% of the targets without ever having the passing down work. Remember, the Chiefs don't trail that often, so they don't need to use the 2-minute offense as much, right? So it can kind of – these things are not always equal. 2-minute offense on one team versus 2-minute offense on another can be very different depending on the way that their game scripts are working out. So I just look at him at the end of the day, Drake. He's a young back. He was a first-round pick. I think he's going to own the majority of the rushing attempts. I think he'll continue to get most of the work inside the 5. And I think he's probably going to see 10% of the targets, even if he doesn't take over all the passing down role. And so I think he's properly priced in that second, third round range. I mean, I really think Jonathan Taylor should be more like a mid-second, right? Mm-hmm. And I would still rank him above Edwards-Helaire just because he did show us more ability to break big plays. We know he's got a really good offensive line. But you could easily argue with me, Drake, that the Chiefs' offense is 25 to 35 to 40% better than the Colts overall, which means there's more scoring opportunities to go around. So I love Clyde Edwards-Helaire this year. I've drafted him multiple times, especially once, like you said, I actually got to draft from the 1 hole, finally an underdog. Thank you, underdog. That was my 20th draft, and I finally got the one hole. And I was so hoping that it would work, and it did. I got lucky that I started with CMC, and then coming back to me, I got Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I really wanted to pair those two together. And so the way I look at it, Drake, is I think you're fine if he stays in the role that he's in, but I do think there's a door for him to win all of it. And think if this guy takes over the complete role, you could have the potential number one fantasy back. Now, I know we've said that about a few different guys, and it's not like we're trying to say it to be dramatic. It's just anytime you have the every down role and you're out there all the time in an offense like Kansas City, you have a chance, to be, in the top three. And that's why everyone took him in the middle of the first round last year. Guess what? Those reasons are still there. The same reasons you would have been willing to do that last year should be there this year. We have seen Andy Reid commit to a single back multiple times in his career. So it's not like it would just be out of the range of outcomes for Edwards-Helaire to learn and get better at his craft and now all of a sudden come out and just blow up the league.
If we're going to take a shot on one of these secondary wide receivers, Mecole Hardman, Demarcus Robinson, Byron Pringle, they're all going wide receiver 50 and up. Robinson and Pringle are basically free picks at this point. Now, looking at some advanced stats from PFF, Demarcus Robinson played over 100 more passing snaps than Hardman did. But, you look at where they played. Robinson lined up a ton on the outside, whereas Hardman and Byron Pringle lined up over 50% of their snaps came in the slot. Where can we find value in this passing game? Will somebody step up? And is it even worth taking a shot on one of these guys because it's so rotational?
Well, it's absolutely worth taking a shot, but I think the only one that is worth taking a shot on is Hardman after Hill and Kelsey. This is his third year. Remember, he converted to a wide receiver late in his college career. He is a game breaker that has a quarterback with a game-breaking arm. I do worry about him being out there all the time because he's not a really good run blocker. He's kind of a liability anytime but they don't run the ball a ton. And everything I've read so far from OTAs and minicamp has been very positive about Hardman and talking about the fact that they really do expect him to be the two. Now, we'll see what happens when training camp gets here. They strap on the pads, get the helmets on, start doing some hitting. Can Hardman really hold up? The beauty with Hardman, Drake, is even if he just bumped up to 16, 17, 18% of the targets, and it was still mainly the Hill and Kelsey show up in, the 22, 23, 24% range, each one of them getting the majority of it. 16 to 17% from Patrick Mahomes to a guy that can be a playmaker like, Mecole Hardman, that could still be worthy of a wide receiver. He could give you wide receiver 3 performances. And if you're in a league that starts more players, he could easily be a great wide receiver 4. Why can I not talk tonight? So I like buying Hardman. I think it's funny because this is really the best chance he's had, Drake, with Watkins gone. He's had 2 years to develop. We're hearing out of early reports are they want him to be the 2. We'll see if he can hold on. His ADP is starting to creep up a little bit, but to me, if I can get him in the 10th, 11th, 12th round, I'm willing to take on a shot at Hardman depending on my roster construction in the 9th, just because he's on a really great offense. I'm not interested in Demarcus Robinson. Everything I've read about Pringle, I really do like Pringle. So you can throw a late round dart on him because Pringle doesn't really cost you anything. Robinson doesn't cost you much either. But I think if one of the other guys has a chance to be on the field all the time, I think it's Pringle, not Robinson. They've talked about really trying to potentially use him in the Z. I could be wrong. Again, we'll have to watch camp. But I'm just not – the only other one I'm really interested in is Mecole Hardman that I think can make a difference. And I think people have just kind of been burned I tried him and probably took him a little earlier than they should the last 2 years because of the speed and the arm with Patrick Mahomes. Well, guess what? Those two things are still there, and he's in a better position than ever to have a shot at getting more targets. So I think Hardman is absolutely worth owning. When I do my projections and I'm doing my early stuff, out next to certain guys, I write in all caps target. And like right now, when I'm doing drafts, I'm targeting Mecole Hardman every single time I can. I do think his ADP is going to move up once training camp gets here and the reports continue to come out that he's going to be on the field more than he was last year.
Well, I think, Dwayne, you single-handedly have moved Jonathan Taylor's ADP because after last week's show, now I'm seeing reports out of the NFFC. He's going from our buddy Fantasy Mojo. He went in the middle of the second round in a draft. And our pal here in the chat, Shirley Shapiro, FFP, excuse me. Jonathan Taylor will be Dwayne's biggest miss at the end of the year. She is coming for you, Dwayne. Swinging hard. I like it. Shirley, killing us here.
I'll tell you what, if there is one, if it's going to be my biggest miss, it's going to be him. And again, it's nothing against Jonathan Taylor. I'm just not taking Jonathan Taylor at pick 7, pick 6, pick 8. There's no reason to. I don't need to. I don't need to be a hero. Jonathan Taylor's not going to be on the field during the passing down. So he's got to be super efficient and he's going to need some luck to score a lot of touchdowns to really be worth more than the players you're passing there, right? Not to say that he can't even score enough points. It's just, honestly, I'm taking Tyreek Hill over Jonathan Taylor. I'm taking Stephon Diggs over Jonathan Taylor. I'm taking Cam Akers. We don't have to repeat this. I've gone through this multiple times, but it's nothing against Jonathan. It's nothing against Jonathan Taylor's talent, like at all. It's purely the situation. What I would put a bet on is he is not taking over the passing down work. Like I would go to my grave on that one. Like it's just not going to happen because Nyheim Hines is too good. He's a specialist that's very good at that role. It'd be one thing if it was Jordan Wilkins was the pass receiving back. I'd be like, Jordan Wilkins. Jonathan Taylor can do what Jordan Wilkins does as a pass receiver. Jonathan Taylor cannot do what Nyheim Hines does.
Man, these Busch Light apples go down pretty easy. Thank God, by the way, for the mute feature because you folks would hear me dying over here with these allergies. Dwayne, we got to get you a new hat. I'm seeing here you're wearing a random hat for a bar or a beer. I don't know what
barbecue, man. This is Heim Barbecue. It's the best barbecue in Fort Worth. Like this is a great hat. What are you talking about?
Hit him with the Heim Barbecue. I like that. If you see here on YouTube, I'm holding one of our Fantasy Football Hustle hats. You go to Fantasy Football Hustle on Twitter. It's at FF Hustle. The pinned tweet is our cool Viridian Global apparel store. Get a hat, get a shirt, get a sticker, get something here. Dwayne and I got kids. We got to put them through school. All right, help us out. Somebody who doesn't need help is John Gruden because that MFer has a guaranteed 10-year contract, and he is just pissing it away out there in the desert. But, Dwayne, you say the Josh Jacobs hate has gone too far. Last year's RB8 is now going off best ball boards at RB21. That's a fifth-round pick, folks. He's going after Myles Gaskin and ahead of Travis Etienne. As a noted Josh Jacobs hater, I'm all for the hate. But the Raiders were a top 12 team last year in run play percentage, and Jacobs himself put up another 1,000-yard season and rushed for 12 touchdowns. His issue, as always, he does nothing in the passing game. Dude has one career target on third down ever in 2 years. 33 receptions would be a miracle this year because the genius there, Gruden, just gave Kenyon Drake $8.5 million guaranteed on a 2-year deal. So we know he's not going to do anything in the passing game, Dwayne. Why, though, has the hate gone too far?
Well, I think people actually are getting sharper around the way they think about running backs, but now they're just pushing it too far. If you remember last year when a lot of folks were up, I don't want to say they're upset with the show, but basically a lot of people said to me about Jacobs last year what Shirley's telling me this year about Jonathan Taylor. You're going to be wrong on Josh Jacobs, Dwayne. He's going to take over the passing down role. He's going to do it. He's going to do it. He's going to do it. And I was like, well, Jalen Richard, not Nyheim Hines, but definitely a specialist in the passing game. And Gruden had told us over and over, and we had seen Gruden do this in his history. He likes to have a receiving back. He had only had 2 other years where he had truly just had a bell cow back. One was Cadillac Williams. Actually, they were both Cadillac Williams. Just one was to lesser extent than the other because of an injury to Williams. So for me with Jacobs, like the way I look at it is this. I'm going to read you the attempts of 2 different players. One of them is Jacobs and one of them is Nick Chubb. I have Nick Chubb at 275 carries. I have Josh Jacobs at 251. I have Nick Chubb's targets at 27. I have Josh Jacobs' targets at 40. I have Nick Chubb's receptions at 21. I have Josh Jacobs at 32. I've got, rushing yards. Yes, way more for Chubb. I got 1,380 versus 1,100. But I have Nick Chubb projected to rush for 5 yards per carry, and he's one of the few players I will do that for. Nick Chubb has a downside of rushing for 4 yards per carry once in his career. It's more likely that Nick Chubb doesn't hit the yards per carry mark that I have him projected for than I do Josh Jacobs, which I only have at 4 yards. And so my point being is their roles are exactly the same. One goes at the beginning of the second round. One is now sliding into the 5th round. Hear me out. I am not saying that Josh Jacobs should be taken where Nick Chubb is. I'm not saying Nick Chubb shouldn't be taken where he's being taken. What I'm saying is they're just too far apart because touches are the ultimate thing in fantasy football. Efficiency can be very fluky. It's the hardest part to project. The touches are the easier part to project. They're the most consistent part, and especially for running backs. Everybody knows this, right? Yards per carry, it's not necessarily a sticky stat. It can go crazy. So all of a sudden, you take Nick Chubb and you put him at 4 yards a carry instead of, the 5 yards per carry that I've got him projected at. Guess what their fantasy points come out to? 232 and 232. They come out exactly even. That's my point. They are literally 1 yard per carry away from each other from being the exact same player. Now, what I will give people, Nick Chubb has more upside. Nick Chubb could lead the league in rushing touchdowns. I don't think that can happen for Josh Jacobs because he doesn't have as good of an offensive line. I don't think he plays as good of an offense. But also remember last year, Drake, we were basically having to convince people that the Browns' offense was going to be good. Everybody thought it was going to suck. But now everyone's an expert. This year, Browns' offense is top 5. It's just funny, like, how people know this shit all of a sudden after it's happened. Like, no shit, right? So Jacobs can be a better back. And that's the other thing. The trash on Jacobs is like, oh, Josh Jacobs is this terrible back. No, he's not. What his average breakaway percentage, so carries of over 15 yards, 6.6%, and he was playing injured. That's one of the best, in the league. He was one of the tops. Last year, his rushes, his tackles avoided per attempt dropped to 0.19, but it had been a 0.29 the year before. 0.19 is still a really good number. His touchdowns per attempt, 4.4. That's really well over the league averages. His yards after contact have been 2.8 and 3.5, both really good. But his yards per carry have been 3.9 and 4.8 because of the offensive line, which is why I give Nick Chubb a 5 yards per carry and I give Josh Jacobs a 4 yards per carry. But again, we shouldn't be like that confident. My only point is you take 1 yard per carry away from Nick Chubb and they're scoring the same fantasy. They're scoring the same fantasy points. And I agree, Chubb does not have the ceiling. But here's the way I'm thinking about it, Drake. From a draft strategy standpoint, I would rather take Stephon Diggs than Nick Chubb in a PPR format and turn around and take Josh Jacobs, right? Instead of taking, who am I getting in the range Josh Jacobs is going? I gotta draft Jamar Chase. I gotta draft Jamar Chase in the 5th round, who's going to be on an offense that's going to be just like an offense we're about to talk about in a minute, the Rams, that are going to spread it around everyone. Guys, news freaking flash. Jamar Chase is not getting 28% of the targets for the Bengals. It ain't happening. He's going to get 20 to 21%, which is going to be really good for a rookie. He could have an outlier efficiency year where he goes nuts, catches a lot of touchdowns, gets a lot of yards, totally within his range of outcomes. But I'm just saying Stephon Diggs is safer than Nick Chubb because Nick Chubb does not have the passing role, and we're very dependent on his efficiency hanging in there. We're very dependent on his offensive line staying healthy. Offensive linemen get hurt all the freaking time. So it's fragile. Like for me, I can get Stephon Diggs in a PPR. I think he's got a better floor than Nick Chubb and basically holds the same upside, maybe even a little more than what Nick Chubb does. Then I can turn around and I don't got to draft freaking Jamar Chase. I'm still drafting a really good running back and Josh Jacobs. And it gives me a way to build my team different than the rest of the masses. There is a way to use Josh Jacobs and his descending ADP, to your advantage. And people are overreacting. And basically now it's just fun to glom on to Josh Jacobs. Like I see all the jokes going around, and so we're here to try to help you think about it differently. And to get an edge, you have to think about it differently. Josh Jacobs, one, is not a bad player. He's a first-round pick just 2 years ago. He has the same exact problem Nick Chubb does. He has the same exact problem Jonathan Taylor does. He's not on as good of an offense. I agree, but he's going 4 and 5 rounds later than those guys. And I would rather start Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs than Jonathan Taylor and Nick Chubb. I just would.
Yeah. And you know who's the exact same guy, and he's going at RB20 right before Josh Jacobs, is David Montgomery. They're the exact same guy.
They are.
You're starting zero RB.
Josh Jacobs is a better running back than David Montgomery.
Yeah, but if you're starting out, you want to go running back or receiver in your draft, and then come back, maybe you want to start 3 receivers. What the hell?
I'm telling you this, because the argument I was hearing on receivers, oh no, man, I got to be taking that wide receiver 2 in round 4, round 5 that's got all this upside. Look at the wide receivers going in round 4 and 5. Tell me which one outside of an injury happening to another person on their team that is just this clear stud. Here's one I'll give you, potentially Deontay Johnson. But you could still get Deontay Johnson, in the 5th round. You can wait. You can take Jacobs in the 4th. But who is this receiver that I'm passing on? Who am I not thinking of? Because there's a ton of them, Drake, for me, that are all just glommed together. Right?
Yeah, I can tell you the guys going off. If you want to say who's like a 4th and 5th round pick
that are receivers.
Yeah, so those are picks 37 to 60.
And don't give me the 37s because Josh Jacobs ain't going there no more. He's down in the 40s. So give me like 45 on.
Okay. Jamar Chase, Adam Thielen,
okay,
T. Higgins, Deontay Johnson, Kenny Galladay.
Yeah. So I like all those players, but am I that much more sure do I think I'm passing on a receiver that's going to score 300 points there? I don't see one. I like Adam Thielen, but he's on a run-first offense, and he's probably the number 2 target on his team, and he is a bit touchdown dependent. Now, he gets targeted a ton for his touchdowns, and I do like Adam Thielen, so there's nothing against him. I'm fine with drafting him there, but I don't think I'm passing on a top 6 potential receiver. So a lot of the guys that go in that range, when I look at them, I like those receivers, and one of them will end up having some upside for a weird reason that we didn't know, but I'm not looking at them going, man, I have got to get my hands on this receiver. I see a bunch of guys that I basically like the same, Drake.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just telling people to be open-minded to it. I think it's just gone too far. I'm not going to build 50 teams around Josh Jacobs. I'm going to build a few, though, because if for some reason Kenyon Drake gets hurt, doesn't play well, and Josh Jacobs does get more work, this guy scores touchdowns, Drake. He gets yards. He's a good player. And now you're getting him at an actual good price. It's funny how people are with this stuff. It's like we say, don't draft him at the end of the 1st. And they're like, you're a Josh Jacobs hater. And now we're like 5th round's too far. And they're like, oh my God, you're a Josh Jacobs homer. No, we're just like realists. It's like, hey, have a strategy, use it to your advantage. I don't think you're passing on these huge receivers, in those rounds. And again, I'm not telling you guys, you got to go take Josh Jacobs. I'm just saying that's 5th round's too far.
I do hate Josh Jacobs. So you can at me with that. Yeah. I firmly put my hand up and tell everybody the players that I hate out there. It starts and ends with Frank Gore, but also
But you only hate him for the reasons we told people to not like him last year, and now it's well priced.
No, I hate Josh Jacobs because he cost me a lot of money in the dynasty league when he couldn't score a touchdown. But that's besides the point.
Okay. I got you.
That we won't mention Zach Ertz to Dwayne for similar reasons.
Yeah.
Let's move along here to the wide receivers in the desert. And I got to get out to that stadium, mind you. I want to hang out in Vegas with Brett Musburger and just drink bourbon in some smoky room. And he's going to tell me crazy stories. That to me seems like the greatest night ever. If that could happen at the Kings Classic when we're out at the Hall of Fame, that would be the greatest. My life could be complete right there. But Henry Ruggs, major disappointment. He was the number 1 receiver drafted in the 2020 draft. Total bust. 26 receptions, less than 500 yards. Then we got Brian Edwards, every dynasty guy on Twitter's favorite pick last year out of South Carolina. He's going to try to come back, win that exposition role. They replaced Nelson Aguilar with John Brown. A lot of questions here. We know it all goes through Darren Waller, but at the receiver position, Dwayne, what do you have projected? Should we take a swing at a few of these guys? I'll be honest. I picked John Brown today in the Scott Fish Bowl, I think with my 17th round pick, and I felt pretty good about it.
Yeah. Yeah, there are guys you need to take swings on. You need to take a swing on Ruggs. Like, you don't have to take him every time, but he's one of the types of players. Again, I've talked about this before. I'm hearing a lot of like draft theory stuff on Twitter, which I love, and I learn stuff from other people. But I hear a lot of folks, well, if you don't risk it, no biscuit. Like, the way I look at it is there's an intersection in every draft where it becomes better to start taking risk and basically open up the throttle. But up until that point, there's enough good players that you just don't have to freaking force it. And that's always worked really well, like for me, where I figured out what is the spot, and it's different each year to where I need to open up and get more aggressive. It doesn't need to start in round 2, people. Like round 2, there's a lot of good, really freaking players. You don't need Jonathan Taylor in round 1 to win your league. I promise you that. You do not have to have Jonathan Taylor in your first round to win your fantasy league this year, right? You don't have to have it. You could just as easily take a player like Tyreek Hill, Ezekiel Elliott, that you know is going to get what you think they're going to get, and you don't have to worry about the game script dependency. You don't have to try to be the hero. And then Jonathan Taylor slides you in the second round. Great. You can at that point, like, the price is validated. But these guys, Drake, that are going, Mecole Hardman's one, Henry Ruggs is one, Bryan Edwards goes even later. His ADP is starting to rise. Ruggs is starting to rise. Everything I'm reading so far out of camp and OTAs is that Ruggs, he's been working on the things he needs to be working on. Of course, that's what they're going to say in these OTA reports.
Best shape of his life. Huge
that
size.
shit I don't pay attention to. So, but it's more you want to read about the technical aspects of their game, right? And what have they been working on? And that doesn't necessarily mean those things are right. But here's the thing: Henry Ruggs is a great athlete. He can be a mismatch if he can get things together. He can be a guy that can beat people deep. David Carr did show to us last year. He proved us all wrong in what he was doing with Nelson Aguilar, just dropping dimes down the field, deep balls. And just hitting Aguilar, for these touchdowns. And so Ruggs could take over that role. I think he will have competition. To your point, John Brown's going to make him work for it. So, but I'm still fine. If I can get Henry Ruggs in the 11th round, let's say I started off like I went with 3 running backs in my first 3 picks especially say like FFPC. Let's say I did that. And then I turned around and took a tight end and a couple of receivers and a quarterback, and now I just need to drill receivers. Like, there's a lot of receivers that I like, from round 7 through 13. Mm-hmm. And guys like Henry Ruggs, you need to be taking a shot on. Bryan Edwards, even later than that, you do need to be taking a shot on, because there is an opportunity for one of these 2 guys to step up and get into the 20% target share range if they can play well, because really all you have right now is Waller. So I think players like that are worth owning, and they're young. So here's the way I look at this, Drake. Laviska Shenault kind of falls in the same bucket. I got to take him in the 7th round. I can take Henry Ruggs or Bryan Edwards in the 11th, 12th, down to like the 15th or 16th round. That's the appropriate price for the risk. 7th is a little bit rich for me. I'm not going to complain to anyone that does it. It's fine. If that's part of your strategy, go for it. It's not like, we haven't done the draft plan, so we'll talk more about that when we completely break down the 7th round. But yes, Henry Ruggs, Bryan Edwards, players that I'm placing bets on because the price is just too cheap and they give me the upside that I want for how cheap they are.
All right, let's hit those 2.
I do have Kenyon Drake at 30% of the carries, just so people know. I'm not saying Josh Jacobs is going to have – I got Josh Jacobs at 250 carries, Kenyon Drake at 137. Basically, I have Kenyon Drake coming in and taking over Devontae Booker's work, plus Jalen Richard's work, and a little bit off of Josh Jacobs, because he was at 62% of the attempts last year, and I've got him at 55. So I've shaved Josh Jacobs even a little bit versus where he could be. And I've got Drake at 10% of the targets. So I've got him definitely leading the backfield in targets versus Josh Jacobs. And Jacobs still comes out to 232 PPR points with a big haircut.
Kenyon Drake, though, 11th round ADP on Underdog. Great value right there. Because let's say, Jacobs does go down. We always know he's nursing that shoulder. And Kenyon Drake maybe could carry that load. That's – league winner.
But then just Jalen Richard will play more, and they'll sign some spare off the street, and they'll have three backs again. They'll do the same thing to Kenyon Drake. That's the problem with the Raiders is they do this to everyone.
Marcus Allen's coming back.
It's not just Josh Jacobs. They do it to.
All right, let's talk a team that used to be in L.A. in the Raiders and a team that is now in L.A. in the Chargers. And new OC Joe Lombardi comes to town after 5 years in New Orleans working with Sean Payton. But that was Sean Payton's offense. That was Sean Payton calling the plays. Lombardi did have a stint, though, in Detroit, where in a pair of seasons in 2014 and 2015, he oversaw Calvin Johnson and Golden Tate both going over 1,000 yards. So what can we expect from Lombardi in this offense, in this passing game where Justin Herbert is now learning a new system, where last year we saw him finish fantasy as QB9?
Yeah. So 30 to 40% of the offense is going to be the Saints' old offense, and that's going to be the passing game. Then the other, 50 to 60% is really going to be a Kyle Shanahan run game, right? And there's just a lot of nuance to that with the way the offensive line works and all that kind of stuff. So you basically got like a 50-50 scenario. The passing game is going to be the Saints. The rushing attack is going to be, modeled after the 49ers attack. So I expect to see Josh Herbert under center more. I expect the team's pace, which was number one in the league, to slow down a bit. I expect their pass to run splits to come down a little bit versus what we saw last year. But I think that the efficiency is going to be, is going to be good. So I just think there's going to be a little bit more balance. They've completely revamped their offensive line. Phillip Rivers has to be looking at this and going, what the hell? Drake, so they've got a first rounder, Rashawn Slater. It's going to play tackle. They added the best center in free agency, Corey Lindsley. He ran the wide zone running Shanahan style scheme, right, that LaFleur brought over to the Packers 2 years ago. So he's going to help lead their transition, from an offensive lineman standpoint. So I think there's a lot of really good things going on. If you look at Lombardi, he has talked up Mike Williams. He could go on a quote. He says, there's a lot of elements in New Orleans, but a lot of ideas folded in from offensive line coach Frank Smith. He came from the Steelers, which is more of a power run game, but assistant line coach Sean Surratt, and then also Shane Day, who was the quarterback's coach from the 49ers, came over. So they're taking a lot of these different elements, but the ground game is going to be based on this wide zone. So folks just need to realize that, because when I originally sat down and started studying the Chargers, my immediate like quick kind of plug in was, this is going to be like 65-35 passing to running. Like I had to bring it down to 60-40. And then when you take away, dropbacks that turn into scrambles, dropbacks that turn into sacks, things like that, it's 56% passing attempts, 44% rushing attempts. I thought it would land some more like 59, percent pass. But it's lower, and I feel good about where I have it based on what I've read and what they're doing, with the offense. So a couple of quick things. You want me to start with the receivers, or do you want me to start with who do you want me to start with?
Yeah, let's start with the receivers, because Keenan Allen has been this stalwart here. He's the stud. Every year he's overlooked, and every year he produces. So what do you have for Keenan Allen? And, everyone's hearing this, Mike Williams is going to play the Michael Thomas X like New Orleans. So how does that shift the, maybe the balance of power in Los Angeles? And does it at all? Because I still think everything goes through Keenan Allen.
We got Hunter Henry moving on to, and is replaced by Jared Cook. And we know Jared Cook can do some things, but you're going to have Eckler involved. So here are my thoughts on Keenan Allen. And I'll come to the Mike, Williams quotes here, in a minute. When I read the comments, like about both the guys from the coaches, but then also from Herbert and then some of the other teammates from OTAs and from mini camps. And, I love reading this stuff and digging into it. So Drake, it's funny, when we talk off air and I'll be telling you how long these teams take me. And I'm like, they take me a minimum of 2 hours, but a team can take me 3 to 4 hours. And you're like, Jesus, but that's why, you just got to read, and this is just the baseline. We're going to update this all through the preseason for people, right? For that listen to the hustle. But we want to have this baseline in place for when training camp starts and the new news starts coming in, injuries start happening. We've got a really good baseline. But I think it's really key to understand the way the offense is going to work. And for Keenan Allen, man, you could not have heard despite the comments you heard around Mike Williams, you could not have heard like better things. So basically what they said is Keenan Allen is so good that essentially the routes that we want him to run, they're just guidelines. He knows what he's doing, and we just want him and Herbert to be simpatico. He's going to be the number one target. I don't think it's going to be close. He's going to get 25 to 27% of the target share. And we already saw him and Herbert get on the same page last year, right? So I think Keenan Allen, is a lock. It's not really anything new to anybody. But I think he's in a great spot. As far as Mike Williams goes, he is going to play the X. And I know I see somebody, Tom in the chat, he says, all in on Mike Williams. I'm drafting Mike Williams a ton. I drafted him on my Scott Fishbowl team to go with Justin Herbert. I wanted to get Keenan Allen. He went just a little bit before I could get my hand. I wanted to have both of them, but I couldn't. And now actually that I even did more research, I'm actually fine just owning one because I think the offense is going to slow down a little bit. I actually have Justin Herbert's attempts in a 17-game season the same as what he did in only 15 last year. And again, that's not a bad thing. Herbert can still be a top quarterback on efficiency. He's just not going to be gunslinger mentality. There's also a great chance for this defense to improve. Of course, we say that every year about the Chargers and their whole defense gets hurt.
Everybody gets hurt. They have a great defense, but they're all made.
You need to look into that training staff. I'm just saying, something's going on.
They almost killed Tyrod Taylor. They stabbed him in the lung.
Exactly. So these were the notes on Mike Williams. This is probably where Tom's coming at it from. As much as the offense will resemble New Orleans, he plays the X. The ball's always kind of found the X receiver in this offense. I think there will be some natural production that comes his way because the nature of the offense. Lombardi added, I see a big role for him. If I were a betting man, I'd bet on nice numbers coming from him on the stat sheet. That's for sure. So I do think it's going to be a career year for Mike Williams. The one thing I always have to remind people, and I actually wrote a piece on this like a couple of years ago for Matt Waldman, you have to take everything coaches say in context. So when a coach says to you, if I were a betting man, I'd bet on nice numbers, right? He's thinking within the confines of his offense, not necessarily just like the whole NFL. To him, nice numbers could mean 60 catches for 800 yards and 6 touchdowns, right? That's nice. That could be nice numbers to him, especially if they're going to run the ball more. Now, having said all that, I did give Mike Williams more targets than I've ever given him, than he's gotten in his career. And I put him at 17%. Now, part of the reason he's never got 17% is like I've never seen a player more aerobatic in the air that has no clue how to come down without getting hurt. Like he looks great in the air, he makes this great catch, and then all of a sudden, like he turned like he's like a bird, like in the air, and all of a sudden, like a dog on the way down, off a couch. Yes, he turns into like a hippo that's just fell off of a cliff or something. Like whenever he's coming down, and it's always like this hard thud. He's hitting them every time he lands. I'm like, oh gosh, does he have a concussion? Which he's had a few of those, and he's also had a lot of back problems, right? But if he can stay healthy, I've got him right now at 17% of the targets. I think he could push for 18 or 19%. I've got his catch rate at 60% because it will be further down the field than Keenan Allen, which I've got his catch rate at 72.5% because of a lower ADOT. So I've got Keenan Allen at 109 catches, 1,195 yards, and 8 touchdowns. I have got Mike Williams at 102 targets, 61 receptions, 860 yards, and 7 touchdowns. But I will say I do believe there's upside from there. I don't buy the fact that he's going to get the Mike Thomas role, and here's why. That's the area of the field that Keenan Allen works in. Keenan Allen, Devontae Adams, Michael Thomas. Who else? There's one more I'm thinking of. They're all used in very similar ways. Even Chris Godwin's the other one that I was trying to think of. They're used very similarly in their offenses, even though some of them start out wide and then work their way inside either through motion or they start their route outside and they're working inside into gaps between linebackers and safeties. And that's where Keenan Allen is a beast. And that is also where you heard the comment earlier. That's why routes are only guidelines for Keenan. Basically, they're saying Keenan Allen's going to find the spot in the defense that he's open. And then he went on to say, other receivers, I don't give that latitude to. They better run the play exactly as I draw it up. And that's more what he's saying about Mike Williams. So I think Mike Williams will continue to be the field stretcher, but I do think he will get a few more of the intermediate and short targets than what he's seen previously in his career. I think there's going to be some room for that. I do think that there's room for upside. Like I could see. So again, this is his median projection, Drake. Like if I click over like to my upside reasonable, not my like off the charts, complete rose colored glasses.
I've seen these. You sent these to me. Yes, you're reasonable and the upside. Okay.
Yeah, so usually like there's 5 projections I have for every player, but there's 3 main ones that are most likely to fit within the range of outcomes. And I base it not just off of math. I base it off of things we're going to be looking for. What's the role? What are we hearing about the role? And I think through what has to happen for this player to hit this projection from a football sense, right? Not just from, well, if I adjust this number over here and then I add my abacus and I move, not to say math is bad, like that's great, but I try to balance it like in like what's going on from the football perspective. So that would bump his targets up to 20%. That would bump his catch rate up to, let's assume his targets came down a little bit, like what his coach is saying, that he was used more in that role, like what we saw with Michael Thomas, even though we know it's not going to be all of it because that's where Keenan is used. But if you give him that bump and you take his yards per catch down a little bit, because you would have to, right, if that's what's occurring, then I could see him getting up into that 1,000-yard range and closer to the 80 reception mark, and then he could be closer to like 8 touchdowns like Keenan. I do think that's within the range of outcomes as far as upside goes for Mike Williams, given what we're hearing so far.
Let me tell you 2 things. Number one, do you know how much money Mike Williams makes this year, by the way?
A lot more than me or you.
$15.6 million. This is the final year of his rookie deal. Next year, he is an unrestricted free agent. So he's got a lot to play for this year. Secondly, and I know nobody cares about this, but I got Mike Williams in a dynasty trade this week. Maybe the greatest trade ever. I took over a horrible dynasty team, total rebuild, traded away Raheem Mostert, who a guy in the league told me I wouldn't get a 3rd-round pick for. Traded Raheem Mostert away to get Mike Williams and a 2021 2nd-round pick. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
What kind of text?
Drinking Bush apples.
What kind of text did you send to your league mate after you pulled it off and he told you couldn't get that?
I'm very new to the league, but I sent you the screenshot. That was for different. You and Drew Davenport got the screenshots immediately. Speaking of guys I drafted, actually, Austin Eckler, my 1st-round pick in the Scott Fish Bowl, needs to stay healthy this year more than ever, just because he's on my Scott Fish Bowl team. But yes, also, I guess, the Chargers could use him too. But
so Eckler, you've got
Lombardi. Let's get to him.
He had Alvin Kamara, right? He knows Eckler is the closest thing there is to Alvin Kamara, really, in the league as far as, the type of different things he can do in some of those intermediate routes. Also can be a really good from a standpoint of rushing the ball. I don't see him taking on a huge load rushing, but he could probably handle something similar to Kamara, right? He could get into that 40% range. And then, if you just think about overall their weapons, like I'm very high on Eckler. This is one thing, Drake, because, my job's been kind of crazy. So I haven't got to draft a ton of best ball teams so far this year, like I normally like to do by this time. I like to have drafted a few. I balance it out. I draft a few early. I draft a few in early August, and then I'll draft quite a few towards closer to the season getting here. If I have not drafting when Austin Eckler was a 2nd-rounder is my biggest regret in the FFPC. Like he goes in the top 6 quite often now. I have him at 785 yards rushing on 185 attempts, 5.5 rushing touchdowns. I have him with 108 targets for 86 receptions, 647 yards receiving, and 6.5 receiving touchdowns. That's 302 PPR fantasy points. Would have been 285 points in a 16-game season. So obviously I'm projecting for a 17-game season. Austin Eckler should be drafted ahead of Jonathan Taylor. He should be drafted before Cam Akers. He should be drafted. Who am I missing? He should be drafted before. Basically, once you get to Zeke and him, like they're together. In my mind, I've got them right there together. If you want to take Eckler over Zeke, I'm not even going to be mad at you. All he literally has to do is stay healthy. And I've got him at 18% of the targets. Like, he could easily be at 20. I have him at 40% of the rushing attempts. I think he could easily push for 44, 45, which is the max we've kind of seen Kamara get to. He's just going to have to be able to. The thing with Kamara that you noticed, Drake, and you and I have talked about for it, talk about a player I very rarely ever see Kamara take a big hit. He's so light on his feet. I saw him get earholed one time by Jalen Smith running sideline to sideline like 3 years ago. That's the biggest hit I've ever seen Kamara take. He's just so good on his feet that he doesn't take those hits. Here's the other thing. One of these other backs, knowing what I just told everybody, that this is going to be a Shanahan-style running scheme, and they could be more run-heavy, and the more they lead, the run-heavier they're going to get. One of these other running backs could have value. We have got to figure out like who the other back to own here is. Justin is probably the next best talent-wise, but he's never been able to stay healthy. Doesn't even weigh 200 pounds. Larry Roundtree, late-round pick this year. You got Joshua Kelly, who was a favorite of the show last year. They tried to give him a role early on. They really tried to let him handle some of the load, and he just kind of crapped the bed. Are they going to give him another shot? This is a different coaching staff. I don't know. But one of these three players is going to have value as even potentially a low-end flex here or there, and could have a lot of value, right, if Eckler goes down. My gut says that if Justin Jackson makes the team, he's more the handcuff to Eckler. My gut right now says the change of pace back is going to be Joshua Kelly. If he falters, it'll be Larry Roundtree. Or they could just screw everybody up and say, we're going to rotate like 2 or 3 guys behind Eckler. That's always a chance. But it's something we really got to pay attention to because, again, if you've got another back that could potentially take 40, 45, 50%, of the carries, even if they're not getting many targets, if the Chargers offense is really humming, that could give you some flex value, and it could also give you some upside if something happens to Eckler.
You know how I'm good with these crazy predictions of where guys will land? Here's 2 names for you. Todd Gurley and Adrian Peterson. Why wouldn't they take a shot? This could be a playoff team with that defense. If you could get AP to just grind between the tackles and kind of take a little off of Eckler, because everybody else is young and unproven.
You know what, man? I would love for the Chargers to sign Todd Gurley or Adrian Peterson. And you know why? Because people would freak out and move Austin Eckler down their board. So, I would love that. I would absolutely love it. That would be the greatest thing ever, because that might get Austin Eckler back to the second round because people would get the knee-jerk reaction. The bottom line is, he's still going to have this role if they sign one of those 2 players, right? Because basically they're looking for who's their Latavius Murray. That's what they're looking for right now.
Yeah. Everyone compares Eckler to Kamara, and from 2017 to 2020, Eckler has 1 more receiving touchdown, 16 to 15. When you look at the comparison of rushing touchdowns, Dwayne, I almost had to refresh the site. I didn't think this was true. In those seasons, Alvin Kamara has 43 rushing touchdowns to Austin Eckler's 9. Whew. I just thought that was insane.
Well, the Saints have been a really good offense, and the Chargers haven't. I think the Chargers are going to be a more efficient offense this year. So I'm excited about what they're doing. I'm a little worried about people thinking that, and I know people will say, well, the coach came out and said the offense is going to run through Herbert. Well, no shit. Every offense runs through their quarterback. But if you go read the context and what he meant, and that's where you got to go deeper. You can't just read the headline that somebody puts on Twitter. If you go read it deeper, he basically says what he means by that is he wants the offense to fit what Justin Herbert does well. And if these coordinators, for some reason, do really well and they get promoted on, the offense stays the same, and the next coordinator comes in and basically runs Justin Herbert's offense, right? It's not just a new scheme. They want to give Herbert continuity year to year in the stuff he likes, the way the offense runs. It doesn't mean Herbert's going to that they're going to drop back and throw the ball 75% of the time, which is a lot of what I saw Twitter saying. I don't see that at all. I would say that most people are probably missing the boat right now on the fact that the Chargers are going to run the ball more than they expect.
You were on point this weekend with some Cam Akers utilization tweets. So let's move it over to the LA Rams. And We'll talk first about the effect that Matthew Stafford is going to have on this offense. Jared Goff shipped off to Siberia, a.k.a. Detroit. Sorry, Steve Rappin. And now here comes Matthew Stafford. So we've got Robert Woods, super resilient guy's money in the bank. We've got Cooper Kupp, the slot machine. He kills it over there. We had Deshaun Jackson. We've got Tutu Atwell that weighs less than I do. We've got, which is tough to do. We've got Van Jefferson, which sounds like a guy who should be in a 70s rock band. So what do we see for this pass game before we get to Akers? And, should we be targeting Matthew Stafford as our QB1 in redraft leagues if we miss out on those running quarterbacks, the Daks, the Kylers, the Josh Allens? He's kind of that next tier down.
Yeah, man. I'm excited about Stafford. So again, this is going to be what I would call a pass balanced offense, which is what I also expect the Chargers to be. It is what the Saints are. Occasionally the Saints would go to a pass heavy offense, just depending on game scripts and the talent that they had on their team, but typically a pass balanced offense, which usually works out to like a 55, 56, 57% pass to, 45 down to 43% run. Now, dropbacks are higher than that. You'd be like a 60% drop back to pass, 40% rush. But once you take out, like I said, the scrambles, the sacks, all those things, like the actual attempts themselves come out to like a 55-45 kind of thing. And I think that's where this offense is going to be. That's where the Rams have been. But the beauty is, man, Matt Stafford is going to get to work, in an offense that does more things for him than any coordinator he's ever worked with, Drake. If you look at the things that Sean McVay does, like it's amazing. He's in the top as far as play action. He's in the top as far as shift and motions. He's in the top as far as running screenplays. He's in the top as far as running no huddle. He's in the top as far as giving trick looks. Doesn't mean you ran a trick play, but just all of these things are things the defense has to stop and diagnose and be like, crap, I haven't seen this. What is this? Oh, the ball's been snapped. Right. And there's just a little bit of hesitation on the defense. Same thing with play action, right? The defense has to bite up to make sure they fill their gaps. They have to. That's the way they're coached. Everybody has a gap that they have to account for. Quarterback throws it in behind, right? Because they had to take that jab step forward. So McVay's on another level, man. I know people have kind of gotten down on him, and who knows how good of like a overall coach or leader he is. I don't know any of those things, but when I look at the way he handles his play calling and the things that he does for his team and his players to put them in a position to have an advantage right at the snap over the defender that they're facing, I think he's pretty brilliant. And so I'm super excited to see what this means for Stafford. And I know a lot of people, well, Stafford's pretty old. I mean, relative to what? Look how old some of these quarterbacks are. And he's still got plenty of zip, right? On the ball. So super excited about Stafford. And you asked a great, you kind of gave me a good lead in here. So Herbert, I have at 345 points, fantasy points in a regular scoring format. I have Stafford right there at 335, like literally. So that's the same tier, right? I've got them in the same tier. They're in the tier below Mahomes and Jackson and Dak and all those guys. They're in the next tier down, but they're right next to each other. So I'm pretty excited about Stafford, and that's even in a balanced offense. But I think you're going to get efficiency that we haven't seen from the Rams in a while. So, like, if you go back to when the Rams offense first came onto the scene, Drake, Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, all those guys, they were averaging 13, 14 yards per catch. And every year it's gone down, down, down. And so I expect to see with what they did to the offensive line, they've made a few adjustments there. Having Stafford, I expect to see the field get stretched out a little bit more. Same kind of route concepts. They'll all just be a little bit deeper. Basically, it'll be like what Andy Reid did when he had Alex Smith, and all those routes were like, 3 inches from the line, and then he got Patrick Mahomes, and all the same route concepts were like being ran like 12 yards away from the line of scrimmage, right? So it'll be a similar kind of thing versus what we saw with Jared Goff. So I'm super excited about the potential efficiency that we could see from getting Stafford in. I mean, I've got him at 4,900 yards passing. And again, this is 17 games, so you guys don't forget that. So basically take, that would have been like a 4,600 yard season or a 4,700 yard season if we were projecting this for last year. I've got him at 31 passing touchdowns, 11 interceptions. And just to talk about the receivers, to your point, number one with Robert Woods, God bless this guy, Drake. Like every year, like he gets like 20 rushing attempts. Like what receiver gets that besides him? And he scores a rushing touchdown every year. So like out of the gate, from Woods, before you even get to his, points for what he's going to do in the receiving game, you get a 20-point cushion just off of what you're going to get off of him, out of, from a rushing perspective, which you're kind of, well, that's not really that much. I mean, 20 points, like that can be a drop in a tier in the way you're looking at guys. So I've got Woods and Kupp both at 20% of the targets. I expect it to be pretty, balanced from an offense standpoint. I've got 88 receptions for Woods at 13.5 yards per catch. That's 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns. That's 275 fantasy points. Would have been 260 in a 16-game season. So I think last year, I'm going off the top of my head, Woods was at 243. Woods has been like a top 15 receiver all of the last 3 years, right? So he's always been up there. I think there's a chance this year Woods sneaks into the top 6. I think, and wow. It won't be because he's 25% of the targets. It's just because this is a really good offense, and it could come through efficiency. I'm not going to rank him that way. I'm going to rank. He'll end up ranking like around my wide receiver between like 10 and 14, but he'll have the upside to get there. And Cooper Kupp will have it too. What it's going to come down to, Drake, is which one of these guys catches the most touchdowns. If you look at Robert Woods 2 years ago, people got soured on him because he caught 2 touchdowns. And last year he came back and he caught, I can't remember, but it was like 7 or 8, something like that. And then if you look at Cooper Kupp, last year everybody's like, oh man, he's the target. He gets all the targets in the end zone. It's funny how things change from year to year, right? And last year he didn't get all those targets in the end zone. But Cooper Kupp is basically already living in Matt Stafford's back pocket, even though he wasn't able to practice in the recent. He was in minicamp, but in OTAs they were kind of they're protecting him. He had some weird thing. It was like degloving. That's what they called it. It's like where your skin detaches, from the stuff that holds it to your muscle. I'm sure we have somebody in here that knows what to call that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So it was like
what happens when you drink too many Bush apples?
So it was this really weird, creepy thing he had going on. They expect a full recovery, but they're just taking it easy with him. But I've got Cooper Kupp at 90 receptions, Drake, for 1,130 yards and also 8 touchdowns. I could easily see that being 10 for one of those guys and 6 the other. I can't tell you which. I'm splitting it down the middle. I'm giving them both 8. There's nothing in my data that suggests it's just going to be one or the other, right? It's worked out different ways. I think the third target in the offense is Tyler Higbee, and I do believe that he's being underdrafted. If you look at Higbee and Everett, over the last 2 seasons, they've combined for over 20% of the targets. I do think they'll still use 12 personnel. So I think that you're going to see Bryce Hopkins get on the field. So I don't think Higbee just gets all of that. But I've got Higbee at 16% of the targets. That's 100. And at a 71% catch rate, 12 yards per catch, that's 850 yards, Drake, and 7 touchdowns for a tight end. Tyler Higbee's being underdrafted. I feel really good about him. I do believe he's the third option in the passing game. I think the fourth option in the passing game is a tie between Cam Akers as well as Van Jefferson. I know a lot of people are excited about Van Jefferson, and I do like him, but I think that third receiver spot's going to be rotation, Brian. I think it's going to be Jefferson, Jackson, and Atwell rotating in that spot. Atwell's going to start off as a punt returner, so that probably starts off with Jefferson handling most of the snaps and Deshaun Jackson rotating in to help him stretch defenses out. Maybe they use 10 personnel a little more. They didn't use that a lot last year. This team is an 11 personnel a lot. The next set they use is 12. I don't think they'll use as much 12, though, with Gerald Everett being gone. I think we'll be back to the days of seeing the Rams be up in that 78, 79% 11. Maybe they work some 10 personnel, which is 4 receivers on the field. But I think when they're in 11, Jefferson's going to kind of have to rotate with those other 2 guys. The other thing is really that other third receiver has never got a lot. Even Brandon Cooks, except for the year Cooper Kupp only played 8 games, he was in like the 13, 14% target range. The year Cooper Kupp only played 8 games and Brandon Cooks' ADOT came down, he was running all sorts of routes and helping fill in for Kupp, and Woods was being asked to do different things as well. That one year you saw Brandon Cooks get to like an 18% target share. So I know that's the high range people look at and they think, oh, well, what if Van Jefferson got 18%? Anything's possible. I've got him at 10%, right, of the targets. And now maybe he could slowly really claim that role as the season goes on. And Deshaun Jackson, soft tissue injury week 1, then it's, that's what people are probably counting on too. But even then, I think Jefferson, is in the 12 to 13% target range. a guy you can take a late flyer on in a deep league, but most likely he's a waiver wire guy, but definitely a guy I would be keeping on my radar. Like if Cooper Kupp went down, Jefferson kicks inside to play the slot role now, and Deshaun Jackson and Tutu Atwell are sharing the role on the outside as the field stretchers. Wow, Van Jefferson's really going to have a role then, because last year Gerald Everett did some of that, whenever Cooper Kupp was hurt. So I think there's a clearer path to whoever the next guy could be. But yeah, I'm big on the Rams offense, always have been. I still see it being evenly distributed, but I just see the efficiency as having bigger upside than what we can remember in a long time.
The last guy we'll touch on is Cam Akers. Never before has a guy who rushed for 2 touchdowns and 625 yards, I think, ever come into the next season and had an ADP in the first round. So Cam Akers started slow, had to wrestle the job away from Darrell Henderson. Literally, the two of them had pretty identical stats and usage by the end of the year. Why do you love Akers so much more going into 2021?
Yeah, I mean, I put a thread out, and they've probably seen it, but you can go look at it. So I'll just kind of walk you through it. So it's really about what happened over the end of the season. Remember, Cam Akers got hurt early in the season. People don't remember that he got hurt like pretty much out of the gate, and so he had to.
Pepperidge Farms remembers.
He had to work his way back, right? And by then, he cost you a 5th or a 6th round pick. And we were advising him in that range. He got to where he was a 4th round pick, and we were just like, okay, we're not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
So people were, that's what they remember, is they remember Cam Akers was not usable in their fantasy season. And I totally get it. If you own Jonathan Taylor, the same thing happened to you. What I like about Cam Akers better than what I saw with Jonathan Taylor is this. When we got to the end of the season, over the last 4 games, and he did miss week 16, with an ankle injury, he saw his snap rate jump from 19% to 67%. Oh, by the way, Darrell Henderson was healthy during this time. I did have some people come say, oh, well, Henderson was hurt. I went back and I've dug through. I had already looked at it, but just to make sure, anytime somebody tells me something like that, I'm like, okay, well, listen, I'll go, maybe I missed something. I went back and dug through. I mean, I Googled everything I could about Darrell Henderson, practice report, because it's one thing I will give. It's hard. You can go back and you can look like on Pro Football Reference, and you'll see the games players were questionable for. They ended up playing. They ended up not playing. But because the probable tag is gone, I hate this. The thing the probable tag used to tell you when you would go back and look at that report, the probable tag basically told you they may have missed practice time in the week, meaning they were dealing with an injury even though they played. So now you have to literally go dig. You have to ask Google things like, on week 14, did Darrell Henderson miss Wednesday's practice? Like stupid shit like that you got to try to figure out. And sometimes you'll find stuff, sometimes you can't find it. So if any of you do go do more research and you happen to find something else on it, send it to me. You will not hurt my feelings on Twitter. Tell me, and I'll dig into it. But everything I found, and I spent an hour digging into it. Henderson was healthy until he did get hurt, right? In the final game, he hurt his ankle. He didn't play in the playoffs. But I'm talking about before that. Okay, so over those last 4 games, Akers saw his snaps jump from 19% to 67%. He took over 75%, Drake, of the rushing attempts, including 88% of the snaps inside the 5. He also saw his routes per game jump from 10% to 49%. Oh, yeah, he had 10% target share on 3 of those games. 3 out of those 4 games, he had 10% or more in targets. Okay, so the problem was he still didn't get the long down and distance. He still didn't get the 2-minute offense. He had 32%, of long down and distance. So he did pick up a little more than he had in the season, but 0% of the 2-minute snaps. And who are those snaps, Drake? Who are they going to? One of your favorite players, in the whole world. Who was getting
Malcolm Brown back in the day?
Yeah, Malcolm Brown. He's like, somebody you would love, right? Because he's just standing in the way of fantasy dominance. But he got 71% and 100% of those 2 roles, long down and distance and 2-minute. It was Malcolm Brown. Henderson was not a factor in any of these roles, honestly, for pretty much the whole season or down the stretch. Down the stretch, when Akers started doing this and Malcolm Brown was getting his work, Henderson had 4% of the long down and distance and 0% of the 2-minute. I think that's it's an important point to make, right? Because they were still healthy together. And Darrell Henderson was getting less work all the way around. He was getting less snaps. He was getting less attempts. He was getting no work in the long down and distance or 2 minute. At least Akers saw 32%, right, of the snaps in the long down and distance. Then we got to the playoffs. Henderson didn't play, so this is not ideal. And and this is a small sample size. I mean, I get it. But in those 2 games, here's the cool thing. Akers was given Drake 100% of the 2 minute snaps. Malcolm Brown was officially a thing of the past in the most important games, 2 games of the Rams season, the playoffs. They gave him the keys to the car. To me, that's a huge vote of confidence. He also picked up 55% of the long down and distance work in that period. So he actually outsnapped Brown in both of the key passing roles, continued to handle the majority of the rushing work, kept all the work inside the 5. And now if you listen in minicamp, again, not looking, hey, how big are Cam Akers' quads? How much is he benching? Like show me some tire drill that he's running through. Who gives a shit? But what you do like look for is like, what are the things that they're working on with him? And it's all like, it all fits in with this story. Like they just want him to continue building on his pass protection and truly understanding that. And so here's what McVay said. He said, the biggest thing is he's got great natural run instinct. So they love him there. And he's a great pass catcher. Well, remember, pass catching is about the 2 minute drill. You're not blocking as often in the 2 minute. So right away, what we could have is a back that could have 70% of the attempts, gets all the 2 minute offense. And let's say for whatever reason, they're like, you're still not cutting it as a blocker on, 3rd and 12. And we don't need you to run a route. We just freaking need Matt Stafford to not die. Okay, great. Maybe that becomes Darrell Henderson. But here's the thing. Darrell Henderson has not been a good pass blocker either. But even then, even if Darrell Henderson owned all the long down and distance work, if you just gave Akers the 2 minute work and then the continued attempts on the ground, like he's going to be fine. He goes on to say it's nuanced understanding of where you fit in some pass protections, where the back's involved. And I think Akers, that's about to become more and more complete. So he's got the skill set, he's capable. And they do go on to say, we feel the same way about Darrell Henderson. We just want the coaches to keep working on it. We see them really continuing to grow. So again, like the way I ended the Twitter thread, like you can't be 100% sure about these things, but it's like you have to start piecing together the data and what does it tell you. You can't go just say, here's what I want the data to be, and now let me make it fit it. And I will say, like, I try really hard in my process. I don't want to say I'm never no one can be, completely unbiased around everything, but I go out of my way. And that's why it takes me so long to do these teams. I go out of my way to collect the information, understand what it tells me, and try to piece together what I believe is the most likely scenario, which, by the way, could still be wrong, right? But if I had to look at all those things I just told you, and you told me, Dwayne, you have to choose, what does this mean about the Rams backfield this year? I would say Cam Akers is going to be a near every down back. I think he's going to he could handle up to 70% of the rushing attempts. I have him at 62.5. I have 22.5 to Darrell Henderson. I've got him, and I've got his touchdowns per attempt low, and I think it could go up because I think their offense is going to be better. Because a lot of your touchdowns per attempt it depends on how often you're getting down inside the 5, right? And how explosive is your offense? What are the other things that teams have to respect? How well is your offensive line? A lot of things go into that, but I've got him at 3%, which gives him 9 rushing touchdowns, 1,236 yards rushing. I've got him with 62 targets for 47 receptions, 373 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns receiving. So I've got him, right in the 270 point range.
It's a kick-ass year.
Yeah, it's not up there with what we just talked about with Eckler, but I'm taking Cam Akers over Jonathan Taylor. And here's why. Cam Akers, I believe, has a path to owning the whole backfield. Jonathan Taylor does not. Now, if you told me, Dwayne, I don't think Cam Akers is going to get the whole backfield. Now I have to choose between Jonathan Taylor and Cam Akers. Who are you picking? I would pick Jonathan Taylor. But volume is king. And I think Cam Akers is going to, at the worst case, have the same role as Jonathan Taylor. He's not as good of a running back as Jonathan Taylor. He's not behind as good of an offensive line. But the upside of him taking over the passing down work is enough for me to put him ahead of Jonathan Taylor in the way that I'm going to draft.
Our pal Shirley chimes in, Akers or Gibson in a PPR and then in standard?
Akers.
Oh, look at you.
But both. Man. Versus Antonio Gibson? Yeah.
Yep.
And Gibson's going to have the same challenges. I just don't, when I've gone, and we'll talk about them later, but surely the reason I answer that way is as I've looked at Gibson's data, there's no clear trend that ever showed me that they were just really wanting to give him more of that work like what they did with Akers. Now, that is not to say it won't happen. Gibson I see as being a guy, Drake, that you and I will really be watching and have to adjust like as we hear more through the preseason and learn more. Here's my thing with Antonio Gibson. You're already having to draft him sometimes at the end of the first round or the beginning of the second. How much higher is Antonio Gibson really going to go on your draft board if all of a sudden this big story breaks that J.D. McKissic has released? 3 spots, 4 spots. He ain't getting into the top 5. So it's like, I'm just going to wait. I'd rather spend pick 1.9 when I know he's going to get everything than spend pick 2.2 instead of taking Stephon Diggs when I know when the news breaks, he's not even going to cost me that much more. He's essentially going to cost me the same. So I'm just not drafting Gibson at this point. Surely that could easily change. Like as we get closer to the season, like last year, we were Team Gibson like pretty early. There were some people that were ahead of us in the industry, but like we were keeping close tabs like on everything going with him. Like, and my buddies that I draft with, because I draft a lot of teams, and so I let people like invest into some of the teams that I draft. And some of them listen to this pod, they know, because like we were in drafts where I'm like, we were in the 4th round. I'm like, we got to get this guy right now. And they're like, what? And I'm like, no, we got to do it. And they're like, okay. So, I mean, I love Antonio Gibson. But right now, I don't see the reason if I'm drafting today to have to do it, because again, it's like if I could, again, I've already given the analogy. I don't need to give it again. I just don't think his price goes up that much.
I remember taking Antonio Gibson in my big money home league last year in like the 5th or 6th round, and people are like, "Who? What?" And it was like,
man, I
could have waited 2 more rounds with these suckers.
Man, we had some really unfortunate things happen down the stretch last year, Drake. J.K. Dobbins, when it looked like he might get a chance to really kind of assert himself, I believe his was COVID. Antonio Gibson blew up in that game, and then he hurt his toe, right? And he was just not the same the rest of the year. DeAndre Swift for sure got COVID. And that kept him out for like 3 or 4 weeks when he had just taken over, really. And they just said, screw it. We're not going to keep doing all this crap with Adrian Peterson. We're going to let DeAndre Swift do his thing. We could have learned so much more about these backs, and they could have cemented themselves into these roles. And that's just like how much luck plays right in the game. Like,
sure.
Turf toe for Antonio Gibson, COVID for 2 other backs. I think Dobbins, I can't remember if he got or he was just exposed, right? And when he got exposed, it either caused him to miss a week or 2. But Swift had knocked him out a good chunk. So these were young backs that we could have learned so much more about, and we could have probably answered more of these questions had we just got to see them play like down the stretch. But unfortunately, like the way the circumstances worked out, like we just have less data points on them. And so we don't have anything, that's kind of – and again, even though this is a small sample set with Cam Akers, the way I look at fantasy is I know people, it's a small sample size. Shit, it's all small. It's all small sample sizes. We're talking about 17 games, right? So sometimes you have to take what you have and make a call. And when I looked at it, the last 6 games, including the playoffs, what I saw from Akers, and I know some people will be like, well, you can't count that because Darrell Henderson was out in the playoffs. And I'm like, but Darrell Henderson never had that role. Malcolm Brown had it. And so to see Akers get to take it, like that's enough, for me, and I get why people are saying that. They are right. And I did disclose that in the thread. Even when I first wrote it, Darrell Henderson did miss those 2 games. So take this for what it's worth.
There you go. And if you have any other questions, folks, we're on Twitter at Drake Fantasy. He is at Dwayne McFarland. The show is at FF Hustle. Go over to pff.com, use our promo code HUSTLE to get 25% off any sub package, and check out the new fantasy football preview. It's up, it's live, it's awesome. Draftwithredzone.com. Use code FFHustle. Save some cash on your draft boards. We appreciate it. And, we will answer your questions. You don't have to follow us. You don't have to be nice or whatever is going on Twitter. But I am dying from these.
I understood what Larky was saying. I get what he was trying to say. I think people took it the wrong way. Man, I try to be, there are people like that you and I will text offline. We're like, this person.
Oh, there are.
I don't feel that way really about him. He can be a bit sharp at times, but he's a really smart dude. And I don't think he meant that in a way of, I think what he's saying is, you've told me this before. You said, hey man, I got this guy sliding in my DMs, asking me for all this stuff, and he doesn't even follow me. Like, come on, man, like give me a follow. It's like a tip jar. And that's what Larky was saying. So I have no problem. I'm not personally going to tell somebody, hey, before I'm going to answer you, you need to follow me. I'm not going to take that style, but I don't, man, he gets to be himself. Like everybody should feel free to be their authentic self. I don't see him as being somebody that's like this complete jerk. He has strong takes on things. He's very analytical, but he'll back it up, and he'll put out his reasoning. And he and I, we don't always agree on everything, but I agree with a lot of the stuff that he puts out. And so, man, just cut people some slack either way. The way I look at it, we're all in this together. He puts out really good content. I know it looked like he and Michelle kind of went at it, but they worked it out, so whatever. Good news is they all worked it out. And you guys know how I am. I'm pretty serious about this stuff. I have to tell myself, don't take it so serious. Exactly. But I get really into it just because I love it and I want to do the best work that I can. At the end of the day, we're all just trying to have a good time. So, I have to remind myself that too.
Exactly. Relax on the politics, relax on the self-righteousness, relax on all the motivational speakers out there in fantasy, which apparently everybody is nowadays, and just chill, have fun. Look up a funny meme of a dog or something. That's what we're all here for. And until next time when we break down another 5 teams, folks, never get out hustled. Take it easy, everybody.